our moderator for the next panel never fails to look sharp. He is actually with me here live in the London studio, which is really exciting. So if Kwame will come and join me on stage. Kwame Bekoe is an aviation professional and executive MBA candidate who brings a successful 16-year career in aviation with GCAS and more recently Airbus to the table today. Amongst other accolades, last year, Kwame was named as one of the top 100 under 40 personalities for business and leadership by the UN's influential people of African descent. And he has an incredibly strong passion for embracing and understanding disruptive technology, entrepreneurship, and it makes him the perfect fit to moderate the panel today. So Kwame, I will leave the stage. The floor is yours.
Good evening, depending on where you are. And it's a pleasure to be here. So today we'll be talking about technology. And really the purpose of this discussion is all about digital technology. And why digital technology? It's because, we're in a day and age where we can't live without digital technology. And it's where we're seeing a lot of disruption in industry today. I mean, just as an example, 2 years ago, companies that we had never heard about today are actually larger than some of the largest airlines that we can see. So it's definitely a place we need to be conscious about and understand how it's moving. So the world is moving very fast, and it's something that we need to monitor, as I've mentioned, but all too often business leaders, executives will adopt technology as early adopters, usually for the need of being, getting something shiny or new and not really understanding the benefits to the bottom line. But then you get the majority of people, and what the majority do is they adopt technology because it's always been done. And they end up adopting legacy, archaic infrastructure, which is costly and which may not be relevant in this new normal that we're seeing ourselves getting into. And last but not least, we get the laggards, those who shy away from technology. And essentially, the issue with this is it's usually because of a lack of understanding. And to be frank, usually people are overwhelmed by some of the buzzwords that we hear in technology. I mean, big data, AI, blockchain, and biometrics. These are all words that we've heard about, but it's important to understand how it can be relevant this day and age to aviation, particularly in Africa. So what I want to be able to do in this discussion is demystify technology. Because you see, technology, it's an enabler. It's changing all the time. Airlines, airports have in the past tended to be on the slower end of adopting novel technology when you compare that to other industries. But however, technology only goes one way. If you miss the bandwagon, you need some means of catching up. And essentially, that's where the opportunity of leapfrog technology comes in and could be very beneficial for Africa as we enter into this new normal. Because the fact of the matter is, the pandemic is either going to set Africa back further than it has already or than it was already pre-COVID, or it's going to be something that propels Africa moving forward as the world grapples with historic legacy, infrastructure, and systems which may not be practical in this normal that we're seeing ourselves in. So at this stage, I'd like to open up a poll question just to get the understanding of the participants and what their feel is with regards to technology and how important a role it's going to play. So I'll just like to have the question come up on the screen, and I'll give you all the opportunity to really just answer this question of how you feel technology will play a role moving forward. So I'll just give a couple of seconds for the last few responses to come in, and then we could move forward. Excellent. I think we could close the poll now and just take a look at the results, and you could share those. And I think for me, what the results show is that overwhelmingly, people really believe that technology has a significant role to play in aviation and in the recovery moving forward. So you see, that sort of brings me on to the panel session. And today we'll be speaking to 3 highly innovative companies that are really changing the landscape in the place of digital technology. They'll be demonstrating how their products, how their services can help to cut cost, which is very crucial in a day and age like this, how their products can help generate revenue, particularly ancillary revenues, but also ticketing revenues. but most importantly, how it can help to create a seamless passenger experience and process in a day and age where it's very complicated to fly and it's becoming more and more bureaucratic. So at this stage, I'd like to welcome my three panelists to the stage, and you can bring them on, John. So we have Ciaran, who is joining us as head sales from Cellpoint Digital, and Ciaran is joining us with 4 years of experience in the company, but an extensive background in banking and technology sales. We also have Nick, who's with me in the studio, who's with Dohop, 15 years background with a number of different airlines in the industry, a broad experience in airlines, alliances, and partnerships. And finally, we have Blaine, who is the chief sales of Inc. Aviation, and he has 4 years with the company, and again, very broad experience in aviation technology. So welcome on board, gents. So, all good. Firstly, what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce you all. I'd like to give you the opportunity to talk about your products and services. Now, I know you've all had a podcast session with John over the past few weeks, and you've gone through quite in-depth what your company actually does. I've been through these. I would really recommend listeners to take the opportunity to listen. But in the 40 minutes or so we've got, I really want to get down to what really matters, particularly for African airlines and operators in the region. So I would just like to start with you, Blaine, just with this question of, just in a couple of minutes, talk about your products and services. Thank you.
Sure, thanks, Kwame, and good morning, everybody. I'm, as Kwame said, head of sales for Inc. Aviation. We're, in a nutshell, a technology provider to airports, airlines, and ground handlers. Mainly focused on the passenger process and really just making that better, simplifying it. Things like departure control systems, both desktop and mobile. We provide a fully biometric enabled touchless journey, our own self-service hardware, and we've pivoted since COVID to providing our own health platform as well to take away some of the pain in the authentication of passengers' health records, test and vaccine records. We do have a presence in terms of customers, so we have some customers in the African region such as FlySF Air. We've got Fly West Air in Namibia. We recently picked up Lyft, got Royal Air Charters in Zambia. Menzies Aviation have been a customer for a long time and have a presence out there as well. And FastJet as well as another customer via a partner, Radix Sabre. So that's Inc. in a nutshell.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Blaine. And now I'd like to move on to Dohop with Nick. Take it away, Nick.
Thank you, Kwame, and a pleasure to be here today. So I'll look for introduce Dohop. I think I'm going to pick up on something you just mentioned when you introduced us, which is tech and demystifying, the buzzwords that exist. And I'm not particularly tech savvy. I've had a 15-year background in airlines. Latterly, I was head of alliances at Welling. But I'm at the stage where I basically hand over the remote control, the outdoor remote to the children, and they're the ones who lead me forward in that sense. But I've recently joined Dohop as head of partnerships and industry affairs. And Dohop is focused on the distribution side. It's a B2B company. And what we do is we focus on working with airlines to use their API content, to use their web service content to create connections that they're not able to offer today. What we're looking to do is deliver win-win situations that are not available in the traditional interline and codeshare world. So the platform which most people will know us by is worldwide by EasyJet. And what that does is it allows EasyJet to distribute content and ancillaries that, as I say, is not available through the traditional interline or codeshare relationships. EasyJet, of course, is a ticketless carrier. So what we're doing is we're using that technology, that API technology, to create these connections, to change the way that people think about partnerships. And it's a pleasure to be here today because the tagline for this conference, of course, is to innovate, unite, and thrive. And that pretty much matches with the DNA of Dohop. We're innovating in terms of how we create those partnerships. Partnerships, of course, we're looking to unite carriers. And then finally, we're looking to deliver success. We have a partner success team that's out there to make sure that these platforms work.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nick. And finally, last but not least, Ciaran with Cellpoint Digital.
Hi, Kwame. Thanks again for allowing me to be part of this conference. So just sort of a bit of an overview on Cellpoint Digital. We can be viewed as both a travel tech and a fintech company, really supporting airlines and aviation and enabling payments online. When I say online, that's taking payments both on the web and on the mobile app. There's two main parties that we sort of make payments easier for, and that would be the customer, like myself and yourself, and also the airline itself. So for the customer, what we do is we enable various payment methods. They make that sort of payment flow as frictionless as possible. When an individual comes to the payment page, they have whatever relevant payment methods are specific to that country, such as M-Pesa, etc., within Kenya. And then on the merchant side, which would be the airline, we provide various connections to multiple acquirers or PSPs or payment providers globally. And we really enable that through our orchestration platform. So we sort of sit on top of all the current payment ecosystem that an airline will have, and we enable our connections across other providers. I know the main objective there, enabling those connections, is to significantly reduce the costs that might be involved in a transaction to the airline, but also increasing the acceptance rates. That's the rate at which the payment is accepted at the end in terms of the customer trying to transact and book their ticket or pay for an ancillary. We make that payment process as easy and as seamless as possible, and increasing those acceptance rates then ensures that there's no drop customers at the end of the transaction, with the risk then of potentially that customer not returning to the website or the mobile app again. So our whole objective is to really reduce the cost for the airline and make that payment process as seamless as possible.
Excellent, great summary, Ciaran. And I want to stick with you on that point, because what I really want to understand is how relevant this technology could be in an African context. Now, I asked that question because, of course, in the EU, in North America, we know about Google Pay and Apple Pay, and it's vastly used, across the industry, across the region. In Asia, we have WeChat Pay, we've got Alipay. In Africa, I think you rightly mentioned M-Pesa, which is very big in Eastern Africa. However, when you come to Western, Central Africa, and other parts of Africa, it begins to get a bit more deep, like fragmented, many different payment providers across the region. So, I mean, how does this technology manage that sort of complexity?
Yeah, so that's there's the way that we manage the whole connection and the partner piece is that we have the one connection, the API technical piece is connected to us. So what that takes away then is the requirement for the airline to integrate to all these various providers. The integration that we have in our place already, we're connected to multiple providers across Africa that enable various banks and various payment methods. And that integration work's been done by us already. So that one integration to us then connects them to our orchestration layer, and that enables then for all of the payment flows to be developed whatever way the airline would require, and we ensure that the payment flows that are put in place ensure that the costs involved are a lot less as well. And on that side, sometimes airlines may view adding a new payment provider in might be a big project, though there could be a lot of work involved, etc. as well. But there isn't really in terms of the airline side. It's mainly us as the payment provider working with whoever the booking system is, the PSS provider, and us connecting to them. That project then is managed mainly on our side and their side. The only time that the airline really steps in is then doing the testing and completing the user acceptance, etc., and then we can go live. So there's not a huge amount of work involved, and a lot of the connections that are required, we've done the heavy lifting at our end already. We've got those connections. The one-time connection to us then opens that entire gamut of the payment ecosystem for Africa and outside Africa as well for carriers that may travel internationally.
Excellent, thank you very much. And we're going to come to failover because that's quite a big issue, when it comes to ticketing in Africa. So just hold on that point. I'd like to move on to you, Nick, with Dohop, and essentially, again, talking about the theme of how relevant it could be in Africa. So essentially, we know that you've worked extensively with LCCs across the region, EasyJet being one of them, and LCCs, airlines, Europe, very few airlines, but vast networks, large fleet sizes. When you compare that to Africa, where you have many airlines, over 100 scheduled carriers, reduced networks, reduced fleet sizes, average fleet sizes of 5 to 6. So, you're dealing with a lot more complexity in that regard. So I'd just like to understand how your platform can deal with that level of complexity.
Yeah, so Africa's obviously, as you say, got a variety. It's got a variety of airlines, variety of different airlines, from full service carriers to low cost carriers, from ticketed carriers to ticketless carriers. Now, for full service ticketed carriers, traditional interline and codeshare can work. There are multiple relationships that some of the bigger carriers have. But for ticketless carriers who are hosted in lower cost PSS, for example, connectivity is difficult. So what we do is we offer all airlines the opportunity to connect, regardless of whether they're in a ticketing environment or a ticketless environment. So there's two things essentially that we offer. One is for you to become a platform host, to develop your own microsite, so you can distribute content that you can't distribute through traditional interline and codeshare. So you can connect to airlines to offer that extended network with an extended range of ancillaries, for example, that just isn't available in the traditional environment. Now, the other thing we offer is the opportunity to be a participating carrier. So, of course, with the breadth of carriers in Africa, many of whom are quite small, maybe they don't want to develop a microsite, maybe their distribution strategy, their retail strategy is a little different. But what we can do is we can enable our platform hosts distribute your content. We can enable our platform hosts to offer your network. The last one, for example, some of those smaller regional carriers in Africa. What we can move forward is the ability to develop intra-regional connectivity in Africa between different airline types, something that is costly and complex to do in the traditional interline and codeshare world.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. And I'd like to come back to that because that's a really important point. In the region, we've been talking a lot about tie-ups and agreements and everything like that. So I think this could be a very useful and practical application. But at this point, I'd like to go to you, Blaine, with Inc. Aviation. And you make a point that, technology is getting cheaper generally. And you've got this tagline or phrase that says you're commoditizing technology, which is really amazing. And I'd just like you to talk to that statement and what it means in an African context again.
Yeah, well, I think it's really making it accessible for operators, airlines, airports, ground handlers of all sizes, rather than just a few. I think too often, things like biometrics get touted as this shiny thing in the industry, and it generally attracts a premium that goes with it. So from our perspective, we just look to make something like biometrics a part of our core process. If you engineer it in the right way, it doesn't need to be that way. So yeah, that's really what we term in terms of commoditizing innovative technology. The two words, innovation and commoditization, don't really go together, I suppose. But yeah, I think there is an opportunity, and that's generally what we try to do with our own customers, is to try and leverage technology that has probably been deemed a little bit inaccessible for a lot of people, but making that, as I said, or putting that in people's hands and making it available to more people.
Really good, excellent, Blaine. I think that really presents a strong opportunity for airlines to jump on the back of readily, sort of off-the-shelf available technology and apply, highly advanced software technology that you're offering to give them the same outcome. So, I mean, we'll come back to a few points there, but I just at this point want to move back to Ciaran, where, of course, we've been talking about the fragmentation of the industry and acquirers. And I really just want to talk about the failovers and the fact that many airlines usually only have one acquirer. And I want to understand from you what the challenge of having one acquirer is. And with this technology, what is it going to bring to airlines in terms of revenue, in terms of cost? What does it actually bring to airlines?
Yeah, it's a pretty relevant point now. Obviously, during COVID, etc., a lot of the transactions have decreased significantly. But within our orchestration platform, and we consult a lot of airlines as well, and sort of advise them how their payment ecosystem should be set up. But the risk of having one acquirer is that transaction goes through the website or the mobile app, and then there's a failure at the end for whatever reason. Internet connection could have dropped. Maybe the card details weren't put in correctly, maybe the balance wasn't full, etc. What then can happen is that we have a system in place where automatically the next acquirer is then tried for that transaction to go through again. So it's a failover piece, and it can retry for that transaction to process through again. Now, the risk is that if you lose that customer, as I mentioned before, they might then potentially go to a GDS or an OTA website. And again, the price of the ticket cost increases significantly, and there's lost revenue then for the airline. So what we provide with our orchestration layer is we have multiple acquirers connected to us already. Again, that one connection to us will allow you access to whatever acquirers you acquire, if it's within Africa or if it's outside as well. And then it's just the commercial agreements are then completed between the acquirer and the airline. So it's a failover safe process of allowing for those transactions to go through and not for that customer to be lost. And that's sort of one of the key tools that we can offer now to any of our merchants.
Excellent. And I think that's, it's a great example, because we've all been in the position where we're trying to make a booking on a website, on an airline platform, or on an app, and it fails, it doesn't go through. And you just end up having to go through, a side scanner or something like that to get the booking. And I guess at the end of the day, the airline is going to see that coming through at the end, and it's going to be a lost revenue. So I think that's something really important that I guess airlines operators need to, consider and monitor. So I think we're going to come back to you when it comes to cross-border transactions, because that's another key one. But at this stage, I want to move to Nick and really discuss virtual interlining. A big topic. It's something that's very topical because, of course, interlining is very expensive. I know it's something that you've done extensively in your former roles with Vrelling and with Qatar as well. And we're in a day and age where airlines still need partnerships. Partnerships still need to happen. But you see, the costs involved or the costs allocated towards making interlining happen are just not there. So this looks like a really big opportunity. And I just want you to talk to that.
Well, first of all, I think partnerships are actually more important. What COVID has obviously it's had a huge impact across the industry, but we're seeing carriers play around with their capacity, reduce the capacity, focus on hubs. So in order to fill those aircraft, partnerships have become more important than they ever have been. But at the same time, what we're seeing is a shift in terms of the relative market share of ticketless carriers across the world. So the importance of being able to connect ticketed carriers to ticketless carriers is only increasing. Now, Blaine said it, what we have to look to do is leverage technology to enable the connections that customers want to take. The reason that Dohop started and the reason that virtual interline grew is because people were making self-connections. I think most people have done this. They've flown into a hub, they've realized they can't book all the way through, so they book a ticket on another carrier. Now, airports began to recognize this, so what they did was they said, well, we need to get in on this. We want to make sure that the customer has a connection, a protected connection. So Dohop actually built the Via Milano platform, the Gatwick Connects platform, in terms of being able to connect that content. But pretty soon the airlines began to realize, well, actually, we need to offer this. We want to be able to distribute this content, these networks. We want to extend our reach. So what Dohop does is it takes the API content, that dynamic, flexible content, which equally has become more important in terms of recovery. The airline needs control of its own content. It wants to be able to play with that to adjust to demand as it comes back. We take that API and then we create those connections with the carriers that you want to work with. And in the middle, what we have is a connection guarantee, an insurance product that ensures that the customer gets to their final destination. So essentially what we're doing is we're making available journeys that aren't available today when a customer is searching for specific attendees. But moreover, virtual interline or API connectivity doesn't stop at airlines. We also have the opportunity to connect different transport service providers, travel service providers. So one of the hot themes at the moment is intermodality. Yeah. Train companies have API content, for example, but the ability to connect in terms of intermodality today is quite limited. It's limited in terms of what you're able to offer and things like pricing and connection experiences. That's changing. We're able to assist with that. And the other main point to make is for an airline that's looking to leverage its partnerships in terms of offering that network, in terms of offering that content, implementing traditional interlines and code shares, add a decade of experience doing this, can be costly and complex. It works for certain partners, but for others, it simply doesn't. So what we offer, and yet you have to remember when you're doing these implementations, they're one-to-one. You're having to do these one-to-one individually. You're having to go to your tech team with a business case. At the moment, airlines, do they have the capital? Do they have the resource? Do they have the time to implement what are in essence reasonably limited relationships? What we offer is the ability to plug and play, to connect to all the participating carriers who are plugged into our platform. So there's a big opportunity there for airlines to extend their reach, to extend their distribution, their network capabilities, to offer ancillaries they can't offer in the traditional interline and code share environments.
Excellent. That sounds really impressive, Nick. And so I guess tangibly what you're saying is, for example, if you have a customer or a passenger who is, for example, in Yaoundé in Cameroon, who wants to travel to Kinshasa,
yeah,
there may not be an agreement or an interline between Cameco and Conquer Airlines,
yeah,
but you through this platform are able to connect the passenger without them having to, for example, make an Emirates through Dubai. Is that sort of what you're?
It depends on the API capabilities of the carriers in question. What they don't need to do is have ticketing capability. They don't need to implement an interline or code share relationship. If they have API or web service content, then we can do that. We can consume that content and we can create those connections. So you don't need to go through the traditional interline IET implementation process in terms of offering it. What we do is essentially quick to market.
Yeah.
It's working with that API content that I've mentioned. So it gives you that breadth of O&D opportunities, but also the content that you want to distribute as well. So essentially what we do at Dohop is we follow your digital strategy, your retail strategy. We work with you to identify those win-win opportunities in terms of who you are and what you want to do, who you want to connect with. And as I said before, we can offer plug and play. You can look at the range of options out there and we can create those connections with you. We're a B2B business. We're focused on optimal win-win outcomes.
Excellent. Now, I'm going to come back to you on the airport connectivity because that's a big point. But I just want to engage with Blaine, talking about Inc., primarily with airports across the region. Now, of course, there are not many secondary airports, I would say, in terms of with the major cities across Africa. But one of the things that I'm seeing, for example, in the country where I live in Ghana, there are about 3 or 4 airports being established today. So my question is, what could Inc. Aviation do to support them in terms of not making them install legacy, archaic infrastructure, check-in desks and tables that are sort of designed for desktop PCs, which are outdated? What could they do to really jump on this sort of digital technology bandwagon and benefit from reduced costs and infrastructure?
Yeah, I think, thanks, Kwame. It probably applies to both airports and airlines, to be honest. Yes. But I think from our perspective, we have our own, as I said at the top of the conversation, fully biometric, touchless journey, which incorporates our own software and self-service hardware. But we also have the option which is obviously helping to drive down the price per passenger in terms of cost. But even for the airlines or airports the airports that are unable to, invest in that right now, we have the option of mobile technology, and certainly the airports and airlines that we talk to looking at different ways to, operate the passenger operation. They're questioning things that they have paid for in the past, or how things have been done previously. So rather than accepting, legacy systems or inherited systems or processes from the industry, they're taking it as an opportunity, really, the whole COVID pandemic, to look at how they're doing things today and if they can be done in a different way in the future. And I think that's a really important, takeaway from this session, and it's obviously topical in how technology can drive profitability. I think whether you're an airport or an airline, looking at different ways to do things, there's a lot of complexity being brought to the table via the COVID pandemic, undoubtedly. The industry was challenged before the COVID pandemic in Africa, and obviously I think that's just going to be heightened as a result now. So the airlines and airports that we talk to, as I said, are questioning things like why, from an airline perspective, why should we pay for access to Qt? Can we exit Qt? Can we adopt mobile technology, which we advocate and provide to numerous airlines, to run our passenger operation in a more flexible way, which is more aligned to our own growth plans, being able to start and stop our operations more easily. Can we look at our messaging costs? The whole industry is based on Type B, or underpinned by Type B messaging, which is charged per character. Can we do that in a different way? There's all these things which I think, if airlines and airports are going to spin up the same operation as we come out of the pandemic over the medium to long term, I think if they spin up the same operation, the same number of desks, the same number of resource, PCs, desktops, etc., I think that's probably going to be a mistake. So, I hope that answers your question. But
it does, and also I guess in terms of monetizing along the passenger journey within the airport, because one of the things I've realized in many African airports, the only place a passenger can actually pay is at a sales office, or which is usually outside the departure hall. But what if a passenger wants to check in a bag, airside, or pay for something, just anywhere along the value chain? I mean, do you have technology that can enable and facilitate this?
Yeah, again, it would be our mobile technology, which is our mobile, departure control platform, which is a fully functioning departure control platform, and more. So it's enabling agents to sell in any location as well, and that also includes being able to sell, throughout the airport, but also externally. So some of our customers use our technology to process bags and passengers remotely at hotels, and also to sell in those locations as well for different ancillary revenue streams. So that is certainly more than possible, and something which has been in place for some time.
Really good. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Blaine. And moving on to you, Ciaran, Cellpoint Digital. We speak about cross-border transactions and payments cross-border, and you painted the sort of means by which you orchestrate payment. I really like that phrase. And I guess moving forward, we of course look into more African unity, cross-border transactions, travel across the region, with SATAM coming in, and African Continental Free Trade Agreement, open skies, free movement of goods and people. We anticipate, or we can anticipate, that cross-border transactions is only going to rise. So it's going to become more and more of a burden in terms of the fees involved. So I just wanted to understand from you how you're able to minimize these fees when it comes to bringing it all back in to the airline.
Yeah, so back to the sort of orchestration piece and the adding acquirers. The traditional way that airlines were set up was it was one acquirer, one provider, and that's changed over the past few years now. And the reason for that is airlines are seeing that there's potential cost reductions that they can retrieve from the cost of those digital transactions if it's been using a digital wallet or a credit card. Now, a significant cost incurrence for the airline is on the cross-border transaction. So that's a transaction where someone's booked from outside of their home country, and the fees that are charged can be 3 or 4 times of what the normal fee would be for a card that was charged within the local card for that specific country. So what we can do, we can connect airlines to various acquirers or banks within those home countries where those transactions originate from. And what that does then for the airline, that shows that transaction as a local transaction. So they have it as a local payment. It gets deposited to a bank account within that local country, and then they can transfer or remit the funds back to their home country again. Now that fee incurred is significantly higher, and by us connecting those various acquirers, we can then enable that cost reduction to be put in place. And we've got a lot of the connections in place already, so it's not a huge project. It's something that could be done fairly quickly, and the cost reduction is significant for the airline. So there's a lot of airlines who had this vision maybe a year or two ago, and more are seeing it now coming forward, obviously, as the international networks open again. So it's a huge benefit which we're seeing coming across now.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Kevin. Appreciate it. And I'd like to move on to you, Nick Dohop, because when you were speaking earlier, you mentioned ensuring the passenger gets from point A to B. And I think it's really key because essentially your business model, it sort of gives a certain level of guarantee that the passenger will be able to connect in airport B to get to destination C. Yeah. And I just want to paint a picture of, for example, biggest city in Africa, Lagos, which many of us know. It's an airport where the domestic terminal is actually separate from the international terminal. Yeah. And if you're connecting from an external, sort of location coming into Lagos, it's going to take you anywhere from 15 minutes to maybe even over an hour to get to the domestic, to connect, to make that connection. Yeah. So how do you manage that risk? Because there's a significant amount of risk. A lot can happen for that journey on top of the normal cancellations and delays. How do you manage that risk in an African context?
The first point to make, Kwame, is that we guarantee the connection. So the customer is going to get to their final destination. Now, there are multiple different scenarios that may impact on the customer journey, whether that's a schedule change before you've traveled, or an IROP, say your flight arrival is delayed and you miss your connection. Our customer service team work with the airlines and with the customer to ensure that whatever happens, you get to your final destination, and we provide necessary requirements such as hotel and accommodation. But I want to go back to a point that Blaine made, which is around the seamless customer experience. Essentially, what we're looking to offer is an improved customer experience and how we leverage technology to deliver that. But in the context of airports, it starts with infrastructure. So, of course, everyone prefers to have an airside connection where they just transfer straight from one aircraft to the other. But that is highly contingent upon the airport itself and the setup there. Now, in the example that you gave, where you've got an international terminal and a domestic terminal, and you're looking to create those connections, what we will do is work with the airlines, the platform host, to put in place MCTs that enable this connection. We're not going to put a 20-minute MCT in place, for example. So a huge part of what we do, as I say, as a B2B company, tech company, is to work with our partners, is to work with our platform hosts, participating airlines, to ensure that connection gives the customer sufficient time to make their connection. But of course, we live and work in a highly dynamic environment. Flights get delayed, flights get cancelled. And we've seen this more than ever in the last year. The most important thing is to leverage available technology, to improve the customer experience, to make it as seamless as possible. And that's a major focus of Dohop's. So whilst we can offer that from a distribution point of view, it's also ensuring the customer is looked after, their bag is checked all the way through, offering the most robust product possible. And what's really exciting being on here today is to hear some of the things happening in that space with the likes of Aviation. Yeah. Tech companies who got this in mind. So a really exciting time.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nick. And on that point, moving on to Aviation and Blaine, just to round off, I believe we're in a day and age we really need to speak about digital passports, health passports, and I really just want to give you the opportunity to speak about the products that you may have in this area that can really just create that seamless passenger journey in this area.
Yeah, sure. Very quickly. I think the necessity as the rollout across Africa of the vaccine in particular is probably going to take longer than most regions. And therefore it's going to create more challenges around variants and so on. There's going to be a need, like in other locations, to, if you're traveling between country A and B, the country receiving you is going to want to know, excuse me, your health status, your test or vaccine status. So as countries and airlines and different regions and vendors create their own digital health passes, as you would have heard a lot of talk, I'm sure a lot of the viewers, around lots of different digital health wallets. There's IATA Travel Pass, Common Pass, Clear, AAK Pass, Verify, the list goes on. There's an African one that's been developed as well. The challenge is, being so fragmented, is how, as an airline or a handler or an airport, how do you manage those? You know, you're probably going to get presented with lots of different digital health passes and also paper documents. The majority of countries around the world are still issuing vaccine results and test results via paper. So again, how do you work with all these different documents and digital solutions? And that's really where our focus is, which is much more around the authentication. So we're not in competition with any of these solutions. We're really trying to authenticate with as many of these types of solutions as possible. So therefore making it easier for airlines, airports, ground handlers and so on to validate the health credentials of passengers. We can do that. We can work with the labs directly. The process that we favour is working with the labs directly to build testing capacity for our airline customers, such as Caribbean Airlines, which are on our platform at the moment. We build out testing capacity, and as soon as a test has been completed by a passenger, that result is available immediately. And by linking the labs with the passenger, the airline and destination immigration authorities, we're able to share that information in advance, so destination governments can essentially vet or assess the health status of passengers prior to travel. And that process is really enabling the passenger to do very little, to be honest, because a lot of that validation's been done up front. So that's what we're doing around the health, our own health platform.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Blaine. And I think it's going to be very necessary technology that we sort of embody moving into this sort of normal that we're in at the moment. And I think at this stage, I'd like to conclude really just by saying that IATA said recently in an article that airport processing time is literally doubling at this moment. And we're only at 30% of capacity at pre-COVID levels. And airport processing time takes about 3 hours per passenger. I think it quoted saying that if it was to reach 75%, airport processing time will take about 5.5 hours. Now, I mean, clearly that's not sustainable. And, we've got a lot of protocol and regulation in place that is really hampering efforts. But I think what was really mentioned and what really came out is digitization is the key. Technology is the solution. There's really just no other way. And I think when you look at a chart of innovation and you see sort of early adopters, the majority and the laggards, I really think we're at that place where, now the laggards have to come on board because there's no other opportunity. Everything else is obsolete. You have to embody technology. And I think what I'd really encourage operators, airlines to do is to engage with these three companies, Dohop, Cellpoint Digital, Aviation, and really just speak to them about the opportunities that they can have in their own context, which I feel will be really advantageous in this day and age. Being able to offer technology, which is very low CapEx, minimal to no CapEx, on a sort of pay by passenger basis, is sort of what airlines need at the moment. So, I mean, really just in conclusion, as land borders remain closed, I really think this is an opportunity for African airlines to capitalize on that and really just convert as many passengers from the road into the air. But in order to do that, we really need a streamlined and frictionless process. And it takes us all in the aviation ecosystem to be able to accomplish that. So thank you very much. Thank you, John, for healthy deliberations. And I look forward to hearing more from you.